I'm Janice Dean, the senior meteorologist at Fox News Channel, the author of Freddie the Frogcaster, Mostly Sunny and Make Your Own Sunshine, and I am ready to start digging deep.
I'm Mark Sutcliffe, and I'm on a quest to learn from the best. Welcome to Digging Deep, presented by Zen Books and Abacus Data. This is the latest in our series of one-on-one conversations with thoughtful, accomplished, interesting people in many different fields. So in 2002, I hosted a talk show on a radio station in Ottawa, and my co-host and producer was a woman named Janice Dean. And a few months after we started working together, Janice entered a contest. Don Imus, the longtime host of the highly successful New York City-based syndicated radio show called Imus in the Morning, was holding open auditions. And Janice eventually won that competition, and she moved to New York City. I learned then what many people have discovered since. Janice Dean is simply not to be underestimated. She turned that big break into a career in American broadcasting. She's now a senior meteorologist with Fox News Channel, co-host of the highly rated morning program Fox and Friends. She is also a New York Times best-selling author of children's books, a memoir called Mostly Sunny, and her latest book called Make Your Own Sunshine. And here's the thing, it's not just her career that has been a remarkable and inspiring journey. Janice has faced down harassment from both Don Imus and former Fox News executive Roger Ailes. She has risen to the challenge of a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And more recently, after the deaths of both of her husband's parents last year due to COVID, Janice has been one of the strongest voices challenging the leadership of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. In our conversation, Janice and I will talk about how she never puts limits on her own potential, how she dealt with the hostility and innuendo thrown at her by the powerful men she worked with in the broadcasting industry, about the pressure of being a 50-year-old woman in television, about fearlessness, power, and kindness, and so much more. Janice is an incredible force, and I think you'll be really surprised and inspired by much of what she has to say. Now, one last thing before we get started. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Digging Deep and post a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And also, share this with your friends. Share it with your network. And if you're looking for more information, please go to letsdigdeep.com. That's letsdigdeep.com. Now, let's start digging deep with the senior meteorologist for Fox News Channel and the author of Make Your Own Sunshine, Janice Dean. Janice, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to Digging Deep. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is a little bit different for me because you and I know each other so well and have known each other for so long. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And I have to say, you know, I have admired you for a long time. You have been a wonderful friend and a terrific person who has always been very kind and generous to me. I'm grateful for that, and I'm really appreciative of your time today as well. So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. And did my mom write that intro?
Your mom is lovely too.
Well,
Yeah.
It's nice to see you and nice to talk to you as always, Mark.
Yeah. So let's look back a little bit. And what would you say is your fondest childhood memory?
I would have to say one of them, because there are many of them, but the one that popped into my brain right away was when I went to an expo game with my father. He took me out of school, drove me to Montreal, and we had these wonderful seats. My dad actually used to help work in government. He actually helped with Joe Clark's campaign, and he also helped John Crosby. And John Crosby actually had wonderful seats at the expos. I think he had a box seat, or he had seats, I remember. And he gave 2 tickets to my father, and he took me to see the expos. I forget who they were playing against, but I do remember before they started playing, uh, Gary Carter, who was the catcher back then.
Yeah.
My seats were amazing, and I caught his eye. I don't remember how old I was. We could probably do that, the math. But I caught his eye, and he actually waved to me, and while I was there with my dad, and I just remember that being such an amazing moment. And my father was just thought that that was such a great moment too. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Wow.
that's a really happy memory. I mean, obviously holidays and family events were wonderful, but for some reason I just I remember that being such a wonderful day and being with my father and doing something with him.
Yeah, that's very sweet. Who was your hero when you were 10 years old?
That would be my dad. So kind of the same answer. Yeah, he was my role model. I just, I didn't see a whole lot of him. So the time that I did spend with him, and I guess that's why the baseball game was so exciting and important, is because he worked all the time. He was a workaholic. And so I had this opinion of him probably because I didn't see him so much, and I wanted to spend more time with him. So back then when I was 10, and I remember just having the same, wanting to have the same work ethic as him. Like I couldn't wait to get my first job. I think he made a resume for me when I was like 12 years old. I just wanted to get out in the workforce and be like him, because he always used to say to me, um, work is really important, and find something that you love to do, and then it will never feel like work.
Nice. Good advice.
Yeah.
And here you are.
And here I
Yeah.
am.
What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
I knew it was going to be something performance related, because I remember, we would have people come over to our house, and I would put like the Nutcracker Ballet on, on the record player, and I would dance in front of these strangers, like do these like, ballet moves, even though I wasn't really a great ballet dancer. And then, I just all through school, I would audition for plays, and I remember air band competitions in high school. We used to do that. So anything that was performance related. And, my mom will also tell you, when I was younger, I used to interview the kids in the neighborhood. Like I would go out with a wooden spoon and be like, hey, what are you doing today? What's the weather today? So I think we could go back and know pretty early on that it was going to be something related to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, the roots were there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What would you say is your life story in 6 words?
Canadian girl moves to the US. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's a big part of your story. We'll
Right.
get into that. Yeah.
But then I also wrote grateful, thankful, blessed, and blessed to have family and friends. So
Those are nice.
that's a hard one, because I don't know where you're going with that. Is that like just in a capsule of a big part of my life? Or right now I would say, blessed to have my family and friends. Like that's the
Yeah.
most important thing to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever it means to you. Like it's a bit of a Rorschach test, that question, right? Of
Ooh,
what comes to
yes.
mind, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the first gut feeling was like, what took up a lot of my life, or what took up a lot of my, what I was doing, I would say from age 20 to, 35, is, the Canadian girl wanting to
Yeah.
live the American dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that. So I frame this question in a pretty stark way, but you don't have to, it's what is your greatest mistake and what did you learn from it? It doesn't have to be your greatest mistake. It could just be a mistake, but what's a lesson that you learned the hard way?
No mistakes. I don't ever think that there are mistakes. I think there are just things that you do that that you did them for a reason. I would think the one thing that made the biggest impact on me was quitting journalism school.
Hmm.
Yeah. I really wanted to obviously be a reporter, be a journalist. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and he moved to California. And I saw him move to California and thought, that's exactly what I want. I want to move to California, and I want to be discovered somehow. And I want to just get from point A to B without doing any work, you know? So I was in journalism school at Carleton University, And I remember like really frustrated because I wanted to get on the camera and I wanted to learn how to go out and report. And I had to take all of these other classes like psychology and thinking to myself, and, English, which obviously is very important, but realizing that I wasn't going to be able to do what I really wanted to do until fourth year, which was like, what? How is that possible? So I
Yeah.
just quit. I was like, done. And
Hmm.
that's not a lesson for anybody, like I do regret not going down that path and finishing that education. But had I not done that, then my trajectory wouldn't have brought me to where I am. I took a year off. I went to see that boyfriend in California. He was the one who sort of like gave me tough love and said, "You're smart. If you really want to be on the radio or on television, you need to go back to Canada and, you know, get some skills. You can't just decide you're going to move to California and somebody's going to like pick you up in a mall and say, whoa, I think you'd be a great television personality." So he was the one that, and I remember that plane ride because I was crying and also he broke up with me,
Oh, yeah.
in a
Yeah.
nice
Small
way.
footnote to the story.
In a
Yeah.
nice way. It was just like, listen, not going to work and you need to go back to school. But had that not happened, I don't know what I would be doing, but I went back home. I realized there was a radio television broadcasting program at Algonquin, very close to where I lived at the time. And I signed up for that. And then, my career really opened up after that.
Yeah. And look, you made a really interesting point there, because I think things are different now, but back in our time, like
Yes.
when we were university age, the journalism programs were very academic and not very practical, right? So you weren't actually
So glad you said that.
Yeah, you weren't like out in the field reporting. You weren't very little of that, and lots of classes and courses and things like that, as opposed to a college program where it was all hands on.
I loved the Algonquin college program. At the time, it was both radio and television.
Yep.
I think now they separate it. But I loved it, Mark, because it was like right when you got there, you were taught by people in the industry. And if you were good, I mean, those people were going to recommend you for a job, and that's how I got my start. Donna Leon Millen, she was, one of my teachers, and she worked at CBC, and she certainly helped me when I got, some part-time work at CBC. And Mike Junta was also one of the teachers there that was teaching broadcasting, and Norm Wright, who we just lost recently. He was also a wonderful radio teacher. So as soon as you got in there, you were on the equipment and you were learning, and I loved every minute of it.
Mm. For what do you feel most grateful?
My family. Yeah, no question.
What has been the best year of your life so far, and why?
I would say the year I met my husband, because that was the most important year of my life, but that was also filled with a lot of turmoil as well. But just because I met him, I would say that was the biggest, most wonderful year, even though it was sort of a really tough year for me because I hated what I was doing. I didn't love New York either. But when I go back and I look at that, it had to be meeting him.
What's been the toughest year of your life so far, and why?
Well, this has been a really tough year, and I know we'll get into that with the pandemic, but I have to, and so maybe it's a tie, I'm not sure, but 2005, when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, was probably one of the toughest years ever. And then this year was terrible because obviously we lost my husband's parents to COVID. So yeah, I would say that those are two pretty tough years. Yeah.
What one person has had the greatest impact on your life?
My husband, Sean. Yeah.
What is the most important lesson you've learned that you would share with other people?
That your family and the people you surround yourself with are the most important things that you can ever hope for, wish for. That all of the other stuff that I thought that was so important when I was, looking for a career, I thought that was the biggest, most important thing for many years of my life, that was going to give me, everything that I needed to feel important in my life. But when I look back now, it's my family. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting perspective. And just to kind of pursue that a tiny bit here, we can talk about it more later. But I think, in certain careers like the media and show business and other things, you can get kind of drawn into this idea that having tons of people watching you and social media followers and all of that, that's where it's at. That's where you're having impact. And then there are certain events happen and you realize that, all of that can quickly fade into the background. And it's really, like for most people, just the 10 or 12 closest people in your world that really matter, right?
Right. You think about what you want to be remembered when you're gone, right? I want to be remembered as a good mom and
You
a
can
good
say great
wife.
mom, Janice.
Great mom. I want to be a great mom.
You are.
And that's the most important thing. I mean, the other stuff is great, but I honestly, if it went away tomorrow, I would be fine, because I have the love of my husband and my beautiful children, and they're healthy, and that's all that matters.
What would people be most surprised to learn about you?
That I'm a good mom.
Why would anybody be surprised?
Well, I don't,
Do you
well,
think
because
people are watching TV and thinking, I bet she's a really, really crappy mom?
you know why, Mark, I
Nobody's
say
thinking
that is because I thought that I wasn't going to ever be a good mom. I never saw that really in my life. I know that sounds strange, but maybe because I didn't think I was worthy enough to find a man, a person, a partner who like really loved and respected me for me, not just the other stuff, the da 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 da, which I'm good at, right? But for so many years, I was kind of dating the wrong guys, and I just thought to myself, I don't think I'm ever going to meet the right person. And so if I don't meet the right person, then I'm probably not going to have a family. So, you try to fill it up with other stuff. But yeah, I always sort of thought to myself that I just didn't think I was good enough to be a mom. And I think I'm a really good mom.
I think you are too. I mean, I'm not there every day, but I'm sure you are.
Well, thank you.
You're a very loving person.
Oh, Mark.
What is your secret talent?
Well, I told you about the dancing. I'm a pretty good dancer. Yeah. And still I can do the moonwalk. I can still do the
Nice.
moonwalk. Yes. Yeah. My kids were like, what is that? And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, sure it is.
So yeah, I think I'm a pretty good dancer. I wish I had done it a little bit more. One of the things I've always wanted to do is learn the whole Saturday Night Fever routine, when he's in the dance club and he does that big, solo to Staying Alive. I've always wanted to know that dance routine.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it, with the whole Russian thing when he gets on his knees and he goes up like that. I don't think I could do that. My knees are shot.
We're running out of time on stuff like that, Janice.
I know. So I don't know if that'll happen, but you never know.
It's not the kind of thing you want to pick up in your 60s or 70s,
But you never know, Mark. You never know. Maybe with a knee replacement.
Yeah, exactly. What is the most fun you've ever had?
Anything with my kids. Trips with family. The trips with I think about Disneyland. We went to Disney World a couple of times. We went to Hawaii for my husband's 50th birthday. I don't know if fun is the right word for it. Like when you look back, it was a lot of work. We went to 3 different islands and we took the boys. And of course it was a lot of work, but man, when we look back on that and just the things that we did and the things that we saw, will be one of the most, favorite trips. But, now that we're talking about it, I would say this past year was my 50th birthday. And I was supposed to go to Vegas with girlfriends. Like we were going to do it up big. And it was already planned. And then the pandemic happened it was May of last year. And so it was just my family and I, but my husband decided to bring Vegas to me. So while I was sleeping, he bought a whole bunch of stuff and he, decorated my whole living room. The backdrop was Vegas. He put a roulette table on the dining room table. He put cards and balloons everywhere. So I woke up and I was, and honest to God, my whole living room was Vegas. And then he organized this car parade where my friends and, family members were in their cars who I hadn't seen in a long time. And it was socially distant. We couldn't really hug each other. But he organized that. He actually got on his bicycle and dressed in a dinosaur costume and was biking along the parade. And then we got the police department was circling the block and the fire department. And my kids got it on video. And I have to say that maybe that
Wow.
was an amazing day.
He
Yeah.
pulled out all the stops, Janice.
He did. And
Yeah.
the big birthday present for me is I hadn't ridden a bike in decades. But everyone in our neighborhood, I don't know if it was, I'm sure it was the same in yours. People were getting out on their bikes, right? Because you
Yeah.
couldn't really do a whole lot. And I didn't have a bike. So I said to my husband, I said, the best birthday present you could get me is a bike because I want to be able to do that with you guys. Everybody had a bike except me. So he ordered it. It took, I think, 6 or 10 weeks, and he drove to Connecticut to pick the bike up. And the day that I got to go on my bike with the basket, with my family to go to a park and just sit there with them and have a picnic, that was a pretty darn good day too.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is your boldest prediction for the future?
That everything is going to be okay. That everything, I think the universe just sort of works itself out. That I think, this has been a tough year for so many people, and people are angry right now, rightfully so for different reasons. And there's so much fear and there's so much anger, and the world is going to end. But you know what, we've been through worse. There have been world wars. People have lost people in much more terrible, violent circumstances. So I think we're going to be okay.
Mm. Says something though that's a bold prediction right now, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
it is. Yep.
What would you say would be the message of your commencement address if you were speaking to a group of students right now?
Always try to be kind, because you never know when that kindness is going to come back to you. And I think about, we were talking about career stuff, and every job I've ever gotten has been because somebody kind has helped me out. And I think that comes from also trying to be kind to others. You just never know where that's going to lead. And so I always tell young people getting out into the workforce, try to do everything you can. Don't just have like a bird's eye view of what you want. Like, I'm going to be a reporter and that's it. I always say, do everything that you can, try every job, and be nice to everyone that you can. Because my job at Fox came from a makeup artist that I met at a local CBS station here in New York. That's how I got my job at Fox. She brought my tape over because we struck up a conversation. I was kind to her. She returned that favor. And now, I've been in this job for 17 years. So I always say, if you're good to others, that comes back to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's been a recent epiphany for you? Is there anything, a recent discovery or something you've changed your mind about lately?
Live in the moment. Like, I think you just have to live in the moment more. I realize that now more than ever. I actually was talking to my youngest son about that. He was thinking about all sorts of things that, this has obviously been a challenging year for families, and the Zoom stuff and the kids not in school. And, he's just one of those deep thinkers that jumps to like 10 years from now. What if this, what if that? And I'm trying to teach him that we have to just live in the moment, like moment to moment, like what's happening right now. What are we going to do right now? What are we going to do in the next 5 minutes? Because you really just don't know what's going to, like, my gosh, this past year, we could have never predicted this past year. Right.
Yeah.
So, I really just think it now more than ever. Like, and if you think to yourself, I got to get in touch with that person, get in touch with that person. Don't put it off. Just
that's great advice.
Do it now. Yeah.
Write the thank you notes that you've always wanted to write.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that
it's
you
so
keep putting
true.
off. Yeah.
Yep.
Other than your own books, of course, what book are you most likely to recommend to other people? Is there a book that's had an impact on you?
I have read more this past year than I can't even remember. I go through a book maybe like once a week, I think. And so there's many of them. I actually just recommended like 10 books to a girlfriend who just got back into reading as well. I'm really into this sort of historical fiction right now. I read The Paris Wife, which was about Hemingway's wife living in Paris, which I thought was fascinating. And from there, I went to The Aviator's Wife, which is about Charles Lindbergh's wife. And so right now, I'm really interested in women and their roles in these very successful men careers, like,
Yeah.
and so that's fascinated me because these women actually have been very accomplished and amazing in their own right, but they sort of get, they're not as celebrated as their famous husbands. And I also read Zelda, which was Fitzgerald's wife. So for some reason, I find those women really fascinating, but I love The Paris Wife and I love The Aviator's Wife. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good suggestions. All
There
right.
you go.
We are going to take a short break. And Janice, thank you for answering all those questions. In just a moment, we will continue to dig deep with Janice Dean. We're just going to take a quick break so I can tell you a little bit more about the presenting sponsor of Digging Deep, ZenBooks. ZenBooks is Canada's go-to cloud accounting firm. They are not your typical accounting firm. I know the founders, Colin and Eric. I've worked with them for several years. And here's why I think you should consider working with them too. First of all, they bring a fresh, unique, modern approach to what is a very old-fashioned industry. These guys were working remotely and in the cloud long before it became cool. ZenBooks also uses technology to your advantage. I think this is really important. They give you the tools and analysis you need to monitor your business in real time. That's so valuable right now when everything changes so quickly. Yes, they're a virtual accounting firm, but that doesn't mean they're offshore, and it doesn't mean they're inattentive. ZenBooks combines the efficiency and effectiveness of a cloud accounting service with all the benefits that you'd want from a trusted advisor, high-level advice, and strategic support. Now, here's what I think is going to happen if you work with ZenBooks. You'll probably start out taking advantage of their cutting-edge cloud accounting solutions, but in the long run, I think you'll stay with them because of their strategic guidance and problem solving. Among their core values, they specifically list being candid and proactive. Isn't that exactly what you want from a trusted advisor? Look, even if you're already working with an accountant or a bookkeeper, or you have some accounting staff on your team, I think you should still talk to ZenBooks and learn more about their tools and their expertise. Check out ZenBooks at zenbooks.ca. That's zenbooks.ca. Digging Deep is all about helping you make better decisions, and so is Abacus Data. Most leaders struggle to connect with and engage their audiences. Why is that? It's because they aren't sure how they think and feel and how they will react. Abacus Data can give you the strategic insights you need to make better decisions and to make them confidently. Here's a good example. A major national union was recently negotiating a new agreement for its thousands of members. This had the potential to be a very difficult process. There were many competing interests. So they brought in Abacus Data to conduct thorough and detailed research of their members to learn exactly where they stood, what they were thinking, what they wanted. And as a result, they were able to secure a strong new deal that was accepted overwhelmingly in a national vote. Abacus Data helps all of its clients understand what's really happening in the minds of their employees, clients, and stakeholders. They help them avoid costly blind spots. And they're really good at what they do. In fact, Abacus Data was one of the most accurate pollsters in the 2019 Canadian federal election. Make the one decision that will improve all of your other decisions. Let Abacus Data help you move forward with confidence and clarity. Go to abacusdata.ca. That's abacusdata.ca. So Janice, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go back to, I think it was 2002, 19 years ago now, that you and I were working together at a radio station in Ottawa. And shortly after that, like I think it was not long after we started working together, and this is something that I've always admired about you, you took a big chance and you entered this competition to get a job working on a major morning radio show that was telecast nationally in the United States and originated from New York City. And I always admired, and so of course now, here you are, 17 years at Fox News. You've been in New York all this time, and I'm still here in little old Ottawa, Canada.
Stop it.
I'm very happy.
Of course. I told you, it doesn't matter where you are.
Well, of course. Yeah. But even so, like, I've always admired that you took that chance and you had that ambition, that you were, that I think that's one of the things that's really unique about you is there would be a ton of people who would look at that and say, they're never going to pick me. And yet you applied and they did pick you. So just what's the origin of that? Like, where does that come from for you?
I'm not sure. That's a really good question. I think there's something about being fearless. I think that maybe I get that from my father, because it's not from my mom. Because my mom, even now, it's like, there's going to be freezing rain in the forecast. Don't go driving,
Yeah.
And I always say
have the same mom.
Oh my gosh, Mark.
Yeah.
I said that
my
to
mom won't go out on the day before the freezing rain or the day after the freezing rain.
Or even now, where it's like, oh, I see there's high winds in New York right now. Like, don't go anywhere. If I listened to my mom's advice, I would not be here, and God love her. But I just, I just like going back to my father's advice in the beginning, like find what you most love to do and it won't feel like work. And I always had that dream to, try to have that American dream. My father was American. And there was just something about that, growing up in Canada, not to say that Canada wasn't wonderful, but, to be quite honest, I felt that in Canada, there was sort of a cap on me. There was, I was always told you can't go past this, like you're doing this job and you're doing it well, but we don't think you're going to go past that. So just enjoy that. I felt that a couple of times in certain jobs in Ottawa, whereas you come here and it really is whatever you want to be. You can do that. I really believe that. It's just something that happens here in the US. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just wasn't listening to the right people and I didn't have the right people encouraging me. But it was always like, pat on the head. You're doing a good job, but you're not going to be that person. So when I came to the US,
that's really interesting because so I think there's a couple of things there. I think there's a cultural difference, right? Okay. And I think we can acknowledge that as Canadians that there's Canadians, I think some Canadians, or maybe the Canadian culture is a little less sort of ambitious and taking chances and that's built into kind of the American dream, the American experience. Mm-hmm. But I think there was something else going on too, which is that there were a lot of people underestimating your potential at that time, right? You were sort of, you hadn't found the right thing for you in Canada, and nobody was sort of looking at you and saying, here's a potential star in our business. Let's find her the right opportunity. It was more like, hey, wait your turn, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And thank you for saying that. And it's not to say that I didn't meet wonderful people like yourself working with you. I don't think I just didn't have the right mentor or the right person that was like, this is what I think she could do. And I didn't really know what I was capable of either, right? But that's also why I go back and I say to kids, do every job, like I've done every job. I've, been a producer. I've been a writer. I was in radio. I did news. I did entertainment. I did weather. I did all of those jobs.
Traffic. So don't forget traffic.
I did, of course, traffic.
There was a line you always had about
what?
about the lane, the closures, or there was something about the traffic disruption. You had a thing that rhymed. I wish I could
Oh,
remember
I
it
had
now.
a bunch of
Yeah,
rhymes. I had a
yeah,
bunch of rhymes. I would write them down. Like I just, I wanted to just,
yeah.
even the traffic, I wanted to make it kind of jazz it up, right? Wow, that's funny, Mark. I'm gonna have to think about some of this. I know you're right. So yes, when someone gave me, that was Rob Snow, by the way, our friend Rob Snow. He was the one who came over and said to me, "I think you'd be really good for this job in New
Yeah.
York." In New York,
Yeah, he
and it
saw
was
the Rob Snow, who's a radio host here in Ottawa, a colleague of mine. He saw this sort of competition that was being advertised
mhm. Yeah,
to join the Don Imus show, right?
correct. And it had all of the jobs that I had ever done. I had done entertainment, I had done radio, I had done television, so it was like the resume was there. I had done all those jobs. And he said, you should, and you have dual citizenship. So, hey, and I thought to myself, well, that's a little crazy, but that sounds awesome. So I remember I put my tape and resume together and I wrote on the resume, or I wrote on a separate note, I live in Canada, I'm from Ottawa, but I have dual citizenship and I can travel. So, and I knew putting that resume and tape that I would get a call back. There was something in me that just said, I think that I would be good for this job. And so I had all my stuff that I had done. I had done part-time weather at CBC at the time. So I had
Yeah.
that. I had all my radio stuff that I had done, not only in Ottawa, but I lived in Houston. So I had some, US experience in a big city. And then I got a call back and I did the first audition and, came back. And I remember a lot of people had watched my audition and they said, I think you've got it. I think you've got this job. And then I went in for the second audition. The first one, by the way, I had to pay my way there. I drove in my like little Honda Civic to New York City, like with my, a map quest. Crazy when I think back to Astoria, Queens. And then the second round, they paid for my way there and they paid for the hotel. But I remember the day when I got the call that I'd gotten the job and I was walking around New York City and I was just like, oh, I feel myself here, So I
Wow.
don't know. I think there's a part of a bit of fearlessness and also wanting to prove something maybe to myself and maybe to other people. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's crazy to think back then.
Yeah, good for you. And as you mentioned Houston, just as a very quick aside, I will always remember you playing a tape for me, and you were so proud of it. Of
Yes, I know you're
do you know what I'm going to say?
I think so.
Of
Yeah.
this blooper of you,
Yes.
because I guess somebody had crossed the floor
Yes.
and had defected from one party to the other,
Yes.
and you had this tape where instead of saying defected, you said defecated.
Yes. Yes.
He defecated across the floor. And what I loved about that, which instantly endeared me to you, is you were so proud of it. Like you were
Right.
so like you weren't embarrassed by it. You weren't like you thought it was hilarious too. And I always appreciated that.
If you can't embrace those moments, then you have
Yeah.
to, right? You have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I loved
Now,
I wish I still had it.
I've got it somewhere. Don't worry. No, I'm
Okay.
kidding.
I'm sure I could find
So,
it somewhere.
yeah. So and here's the great thing is fortunately that was in a time before YouTube or social media, right? Because
Oh my gosh, crazy.
we'd both be able to find it within 10 seconds.
Right. I'd still be proud of it though.
Yeah. So here's this big break for you, huge break, right? This is, there would be people all over North America who would think, wow, I got a chance to move to New York City and work on one of the most high profile morning shows in the country. And so a huge opportunity, but of course it also turned out to be a horrible experience, right?
Terrible. Worst job ever.
Yeah.
Job ever.
Can you describe kind of what you went through?
Abusive. Right away I knew that it was not going to be a good place for me. everybody around except for Imus himself were really nice people. That was the hard part, is that, all the people that worked at WFAN, which was the radio station, were kind, very helpful people, but he was just so awful. I mean, he treated me really badly. He would call me stupid and fat, and just like, it was like we were, back in high school or something. But he knew how to play it, because he would, every so often he would like throw me a bone and say, "You're doing a good job," and then I'd be like, "Oh, okay, he thinks I'm doing a good job," and then the next day it would be like he would ignore me, or he would never put me on the air, or he would say I was terrible, or I would write out, I wrote his news for his newsman, Charles McCourt. So I was writing news for him, and then I had to write the business report for Imus. And he was so picky that if you like the punctuation was wrong or something, he would like throw you out of the studio, and then you would like be banished for days. Like she's not getting on the air. He was just, it was such a, I knew right away, and so that was really difficult, because I had moved to New York. I didn't know anyone. I was making hardly any money in this job, like barely being able to pay rent, and thinking that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And that's when I met my husband. And he knew I was going through a difficult time. So I was there for less than a year. I started looking for a new job relatively quickly after I got that job. And it was funny, because all these years later, and I wrote about it in Mostly Sunny, I wrote a chapter about the Imus years, because, back then there was no HR. Like, everyone knew he treated me terribly, but there was just no one complained, and they weren't going to get rid of him because he was making millions and millions of dollars for the company. But
And in fact, I would jump in here, Janice, to say it was almost part of his appeal on some perverse level, right?
Yes,
like that
absolutely.
he was a jerk, right? That
He was a jerk.
like he was a shock jock, right?
Yes.
So
And also,
this was part of the shtick almost. Nobody would have been surprised by this.
well, that's it. And he also carried a loaded gun every day to work. Like, and he would take out bullets and name the bullets after all of the people that, like, this one's for Janice, this one's for Lou. He died last year. And, of course, on social media, it was like, oh, the original shock jock, so talented. And I was just like, you know what? You can be talented and you can donate to charity, which is, he did. He donated a lot of money to charity. He helped sick kids, but you can also be a really, really awful person. And I said that on social media because that was my experience. And I got an email from his daughter. He has 4 daughters. And she reached out to me and said, I believe you. I believe all of the things that you said about my father. And I just wanted to tell you that he's not around to say I'm sorry, but on behalf of him, I'm sorry. And it was just like one of those moments where I don't know, because for so many years, I just was afraid to talk about it, was afraid to go against this powerful guy. And it was just sort of this moment where, even though he wasn't the one, because I always thought to myself, if he came back and apologized to me, I would have accepted that, and I would have moved on, right? If he had said, I'm really sorry for the way I treated you all that year. You didn't deserve to be treated that way. But I got it from his daughter, and in many ways that was more powerful than him.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah.
She's obviously a special person to do that.
She is. We're still in touch, and he wasn't unfortunately, he was just not a nice person in a lot of ways, and he didn't treat a lot of people very well, including his daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from that experience, if anything? I don't even know if that's a fair question, because somebody treating you like crap for a year is not meant to be a learning experience for you. But at the same time, I see you as someone you've been through all these different experiences. We'll talk about your MS diagnosis, and so like I think you've been shaped by a lot of this stuff, right? It's inevitable.
Absolutely. That was the beginning of, I'm not going to let these powerful men treat me like crap. I think of the stuff that I'm doing now with our governor, um, and fighting back. Had I not had the experience with Imus, had I not had the experience with Roger Ailes, um, who I also, went and talked about, I was harassed by him, um, and went to the lawyers, Paul Weiss, and told them my story. Um, I think, all of those are building blocks for strength to go against these really powerful men who really shouldn't get away with this crap anymore.
Yeah.
And Imus kind of started that. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that experience? You don't have to get into it in any great detail if you don't want to, but I think we've seen a progression in terms of how those situations are handled, right? Over the course of the time that you've been in the media in New York City, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So when I got hired at Fox, Roger hired me, Roger Ailes. And our first meeting together was very businesslike. And he actually saw me on Imus. He knew who I was from Imus. And he was kind of like, you're the good time girl, right? Like, because I did something called the scum report for Imus, so it was like, the down and dirty stuff. And, Imus would always be like, you're the single one. Tell me what you did last night, that kind of thing. So it was a role I was playing. So when Roger hired me, he knew me from that position. And so he was always like, like, are you really that girl type of thing? And I was like, no, I'm not, I'm just playing a role. So, the first time we had that conversation, it was in his office at Fox, and there was nothing weird about it. I remember the conversation, and he was certainly somebody who was very, charming and funny and also crude. But then we had another, he wanted to meet me again, and he had picked a lobby of a hotel in Times Square. And we met in that hotel lobby, and he, ordered a drink, and I had a drink, and I just remember being very uncomfortable because he grabbed my hand and said, have you been thinking about me? Like, what have you been thinking about this week? And I was just like, a job. I would love a job at Fox. I knew that it was something a little strange with that. But I was working over at Imus, and I was thinking, oh God, are all of these people here in New York, these crazy men that just like say whatever they want? I just couldn't believe it. And then I just didn't think I was going to get a job. And then the third time, he called me at home, and he got on the phone. His secretary said, Janice Dean, Roger Ailes for you. And I got on the phone. I was like, hi, Mr. Ailes. And he was like, have you been thinking about me? I've been thinking about you. And then he, asked me how good I was at phone sex. So that's how that went. And I said, I'm terrible. I'm terrible at that. And he, he kind of prodded a little bit more to see if I would go there. And I never did. I was just like, this is not a 1-900 number, Mr. Ailes. And then, he offered me the job. So I was like, okay, he's just a gross guy, but he's going to give me this job. But, I remember at the time thinking, this is not a normal person, and this is not normal behavior. But I'm not going to say that was the first time in my career that's ever happened. I would say that a lot of even in school, even in university, even at, going to college, there were always these types of men that would test you to see how far you would go. And I was always able to sort of joke around, walk that line. I think a lot of women did the same thing. And, not go down that road. So, even though I found it was gross and repulsive, I knew I could always handle myself in that situation. And I never really felt threatened like he was going to touch me or anything like that. As it turns out, he did. He was a terrible man, and he did terrible things. And so when it came time to talk about those terrible things, I thought I would probably lose my job. I never thought he was going to be fired or go anywhere. But it was important to tell my story so that if it was a pattern of behavior, that that would be documented.
Yeah, and what you describe, I think was so common,
Of course.
where there was almost a technique that guys like that would employ, where they would walk down a path far enough that they could see what your reaction was, but not far enough that they couldn't turn around and pretend it was all for a joke, right?
Exactly.
That was the methodology, to be able to throw out their hands if you objected, to say, "Oh, come on, I was just kidding around.
Joking.
Let's get to the serious stuff now."
Right.
And totally unforgivable, but so calculated and predatory, right?
Of
Yeah,
course. Of course. And, unfortunately, a lot of us, you have to remember there was no Me Too movement at the time.
yeah.
A lot of us told our stories to our girlfriends. Like I had told my story to Megan Kelly, who's a very close friend of mine. So she knew my story. I knew her story, but we didn't really know that story was others, So, but we always wondered. And so when the Gretchen Carlson thing happened, and that, she said that had happened to her, that's when the walls started crumbling. And they Fox, to their credit, at the beginning it was handled by Roger, and he was going to conduct his own investigation into himself.
That
um
seems reasonable.
right, but but it's still being done. Like you talk,
I know.
when you're talking about the governor of New York, he's doing exactly the same things. He's conducting investigations into himself instead of allowing an outside investigation to happen. So, long story short, even though we've gone long, the right thing was done. There was an outside law firm that came in, and we were all able to tell our story, and he was fired.
Do you think things are different now, or I don't think we've gone anywhere near far enough, but have things improved?
At Fox, yes. I mean,
Hmm.
back when I was hired, there was really there was an HR department, but it was run by Roger. So if you went to complain, it went to him. Now, they have 1-800, you can
Yeah.
dial a number and be anonymous. And there are many supervisors you can go to, and that's encouraged. And I've always said that I would hope that if anybody felt uncomfortable, a young lady, a young woman, or a young man, that came to Fox and they felt uncomfortable or didn't know what to do, I have always said that my door is always open so that I can, try to help whoever it is
Yeah.
navigate that kind of thing. But I don't think it is getting, you asked that, there needs to be much more done.
Yeah. There's still a lot to fix, for sure.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. The awareness
Um,
is good, though.
yeah. Yeah. I hope it's a lot less. What you described is a lot less acceptable, or perceived as acceptable, or defendable, or that the tricks are less likely to work now.
I hope so.
Yeah. You talk about playing a role on the Imus show, and I know to an extent there's some of that that's going on all the time in broadcasting. If you're on a show that's meant to be, waking everybody up and making them feel happy about their day, and you're not having a great day, you don't sort of, you're gonna portray sort of a happiness. But do you feel in particular that there's pressure, and there has been, on you and on other women in particular in broadcasting, to sort of always project this kind of sunny disposition, this bubbliness, that sort of thing?
Yes, yes. I think that's part of me, though. I definitely think I am that mostly sunny, glass half full type of girl. And actually, maybe to a fault, because I remember people, especially when the Roger stuff was happening. I remember one person saying to me, "Well, you're always so fun and friendly. Like maybe he took it the wrong way, you know? And I was like, no, 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 that shouldn't be an excuse at all. Um, but I think you can be both. Like I'm that person, but I also have another side to me that's serious and wants, you know, wants good things for other people and wants to be someone who stands up for the right reasons. Um, but yes, I will say that, of course, I think through most of my career, I was sort of looked upon as that sort of person who was going to bring that to a morning show. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that that's important. But now, you know, in my 50th year, I realize that, you know, there's a lot of layers, and you can be several things at the same time.
Yeah. And I remember, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but I remember having a conversation with you maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and you being aware of the reality that this is a business like the entertainment business too, that's incredibly unfair to women as they get older. And you were aware of that, and you were realistic about it, even though you may not agree with it. But here you still are, doing the same thing. Do you like just tell me more about that? Because I have very strong feelings about that. It bothers me a lot that this is a business where a 50 something guy, nobody's thinking about, oh, is this getting close to the end of the line. Even somebody in their 70s in the broadcasting world who's male, nobody's thinking about their age. But when a woman turns 40 in the broadcasting business, that this clock starts ticking, right?
Absolutely. And I talk about that in the Mostly Sunny. Is I feel that pressure now, not as much. Now I'm kind of like, whatever, I'm happy with good lighting. Lighting is great. I still color my hair. I do certain things, but uh, I don't want to feel that pressure anymore. And several years ago, I actually went and got like a procedure done on my neck. It was supposed to be one of those in and out procedures in the doctor's office. And I was under anesthesia, so that should tell you something, that it's not as easy as like an in and out procedure. And he screwed it up. He screwed up, like, you couldn't tell now, but I have like little, marks where he went in with the whatever, it was like a tube of some sort, to what the thing was, to bring collagen out, like to reestablish that collagen that typically sort of weakens as you get older. But I had he went too hot with the tubing, and I had like Bell's palsy for a few months, and I was off work. And I remember going through that and thinking to myself, why did I do that to myself? Like, I actually thought I wasn't going to get like my smile back 100%. It's still not 100%. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago. But I was so mad at myself to do that. And my husband was mad, because he doesn't want me to have to go through something like that. So while I will say, I'll do little things, I do some Botox. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Whatever somebody wants to do to feel better about themselves, but to actually feel that pressure of wanting to look younger for a job, that's not cool. And so now I sort of feel like, take it or leave it. If you've got good lighting, I'll take it. And I'll still highlight my hair and do what I can, but I'll never do that again, where I could like damage my smile, which to me is like one of my best features, is my smile. And I was born with that smile. I had the same smile when I was 3 years old, and I have the same smile when I'm 50. And to actually have something that affected that is like heartbreaking. So, my thing is, whatever makes you feel good, do whatever is fine. But yes, the pressure that women feel, to have to do that to stay younger is difficult, especially when it comes to, like you said, I look at my husband who's 50 and he's got wrinkles and he's got gray hair, but he's still, is distinguished and handsome and rugged. And so yeah, it's tough. I don't know if we're going to fix that either, my friend.
Yeah. I'm always looking at my neck now when I'm on Zoom calls. But
You
thanks for the warning about that
Well,
procedure.
listen, and that's another thing is that I look at men, with their suits and their ties, right? So I wish I could wear a suit and tie so you didn't have to see
Yeah.
like the turkey neck,
You look fine. But like, what a terrible thing in a way, right? That you would feel that pressure,
Mhm.
to anyway. Um, I hope we can, change takes a long time, but I hope we're moving in the right direction.
Me too.
Let's talk about you mentioned in 2005, I think it was, you were diagnosed with MS. Can you talk about what you went through and how you're doing with that now?
I'm good, knock wood. It was a really dark period of time. I'm not going to lie, because I saw myself in a wheelchair and I saw all of the things that I worked so hard for, the job, the moving to New York, the boyfriend, the wonderful boyfriend, the possibility of a family somewhere down the line. I saw all of that ending with a diagnosis. And because I didn't know a whole lot about MS at the time, I saw this wheelchair in my life, and I just thought it was going to be devastating. And I'm not going to lie, I spent, at least a week feeling sorry for myself and going through a battery of tests and trying to find the right doctor and trying to find, the right medication to go on. And also at that time, trying to find people that were also living with MS and were doing okay. So I was looking for that person or that thing that could tell me that I was going to be okay. And thankfully I had that because a person that I work with at Fox, it's still there now, Neil Cavuto, he had MS. He went public with his diagnosis. So I had someone in the building that had the same thing that I was diagnosed with. I was able to go talk to him. He was able to, calm me down relative to what I was dealing with. He knew that a diagnosis like that was a huge, you know, a huge event. And so he didn't sugarcoat that, but at the same time, he sort of said, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We work for a good company that if you are in a wheelchair, they will make his and her wheelchair ramps for both of us. It's not the end of the world. They're getting better with the therapies. And so it was that one person that was able to tell me that he's doing okay, despite something. And that kind of was like sort of like the sunshine peeking through the dark clouds, right? That if he was okay, then maybe I was going to be okay. So here we are, 16 years later. I'm doing well. There's been bumps in the road. I'm on a different therapy than I was when I was first diagnosed. And that's working really well. And some really amazing news that I saw a few months ago is they might be looking at a vaccine for MS, much like the vaccine that they're using for COVID. So the COVID vaccine, the technology that is used with that is being used to perhaps help diagnoses like MS, like Alzheimer's. It might be a puzzle piece going forward in science that can help us with these types of neurological illnesses, which is a huge, it would be tremendous to have a
Wow,
vaccine for MS. Yeah,
that would be incredible.
it would. Yeah.
And let me just say for the moment, like just I've all, the other thing I always admire about you is you have this instinct to share, so you shared publicly your MS diagnosis. You shared publicly this thing that happened with the surgery, the
Mm-hmm.
cosmetic surgery on your neck. You're so open and candid about that. And I think that makes a huge difference to anybody else who's experiencing this kind of thing. And it seems to be sort of your default, where a lot of people, their default would be to withhold that information.
Yeah, I think I've always been like that my whole life. It's like you go through something and you think to yourself, well, if I'm feeling this way, then there's got to be other people feeling the same way. And what if I can use this experience to speak to somebody going through the same type of thing. So, for example, the MS diagnosis, I actually had a boss who said, because I went to him and said, what if we did like a piece where a camera comes with me to go to an MRI or go to my doctor's office to talk about, what they look for on my brain and my spine. And he was like, no, 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 you need to keep that. Like, we're not going to talk about that on air. And I didn't like that answer. I actually went to another boss and said, in the news department, and said, can I do a news piece about this? And they were like, yeah, that's going to help somebody. So I went behind the other boss's back to try to do something. And it was a risky thing to do. But I thought that it was more important to share my experience so that I could help somebody else. And that's always really sort of been, I've always thought, maybe I got into this job, not just to do the weather or, be that fun gal on the radio, but to also share experiences so that I can help somebody else.
Yeah. Good for you. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thanks.
You said at one point, I read in an interview, that your kids saved your life when it came to the MS. Can you tell me what that means?
Yes. So my neurologist told me at the time, I was diagnosed when I was 35, and he told me, my husband was with me, and we were talking about how, for some reason, when a woman is pregnant, they very rarely have any relapses. The body is so busy protecting the baby that it forgets to attack itself, which is essentially what MS is. It's my immune system is attacking my central nervous system, which is my brain and my spine, and that's why when they go and look at MRIs, they look to see if I have any lesions or sores on my brain or my spine that would indicate my immune system attacking itself. So when the woman is pregnant, it's almost like the immune system is so focused on helping the baby grow that it doesn't attack itself. So my neurologist said, are you guys planning to have kids anytime soon? This was when I was like 37. He's like, because this happens. And I looked at him and I was like, so that means I can go off the meds, which at the time I was giving myself a needle every day. And that's terrible. It's a constant reminder that something's wrong with you. So I was like, can I go off the meds? And he was like, yes, you go off the meds and you try to get pregnant. And I looked at Sean, I'm like, let's do it. Let's get pregnant. Now that's not to say that we weren't sort of thinking about it, but it wasn't on the forefront. But right then and there, we decided we're going to try to have a baby, because that would be awesome if I didn't have to worry about MS for 9 months out of my life. And I know that sounds weird, a weird way of deciding to have children, but I am so grateful for that moment. And I hope that I would have had kids even if I didn't have MS, but I'm not sure. But I do remember that moment sort of being like, let's try. And luckily it worked. And I had Matthew, and then I had Theodore 2 years later, and both healthy pregnancies. I did really well, and I didn't have any exacerbations while I was pregnant. So, and I know that they are looking into that, like why that happens. Is there a way that we can mimic pregnancy in a woman to stop the process of the attack that goes on in your body with multiple sclerosis? But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because being diagnosed for many reasons was a wonderful thing for me. Not only do I think it brought family into my life, but also prioritized my life. Up until that point, it was New York, job, next thing. What am I doing next? And where am I going here? And whereas it makes you stop and say, what's most important in my life? My health and my relationships with my family. And that's what's important.
Yeah.
The work stuff, yeah, it's important, but it's not everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't you find, and I see this in you, and I think we've talked about it before, but I feel like, because you started out big dreams, big ambitions, you were chasing after things. once you sort of get to that point of discovering what you just described, it's incredibly liberating, right? And then it's almost like career wise, you're playing with house money, right? Whatever, if good things happen, great. If they don't, that's okay too, because I've got perspective and I've got the people I love, right?
Absolutely. Everything else is a cherry on top, like it really is. It's so grateful, Mark, because I'm so glad that, I'm here and what's happening now. And I would be, I think, a very sad person had I not gone down this path of having a family. And that's not to say that people can't be happy with, without kids or a career, and that's important. But for me, I'm talking
Yeah.
about for me, my life. I mean, my children are the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Like just I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the last year. And it's a very serious story. Obviously, you lost your father-in-law and your mother-in-law. I feel, I feel very sympathetic to you and Sean and your kids. And that in itself would have been obviously a very difficult thing to go through, but it turned into so much more than that, obviously, because you, again, with this instinct of yours to kind of share your experience, you started talking publicly about it. You started talking about the state of healthcare in New York State and long-term care facilities, and this turned you into one of the fiercest critics of the governor of New York State. So, how did all this happen?
Hmm. Well, as you mentioned, my husband lost both his father and his mother in elder care, separate elder care facilities. And, I don't get to talk about this a lot, but I feel so much compassion for people who have to decide about what to do with their ailing parents, right? Sean's parents lived in this 4-story walk up for 50 years in Brooklyn. It was rent controlled. We knew that at some point they weren't going to be able to get down those stairs. And for many years, we tried to get them to move, to the point of, we said that we would help them. We would give them money so that they could move to another place, that they could, actually walk up maybe 2 stairs instead of 4 flights of stairs. But that they just were proud people. They didn't want any of that. They just said, we'll deal with it when it happens. And, it was always kind of shut down. So his dad actually started getting sick and he had dementia. So he, his health was failing and his mind was failing him as well. His mom, her mind was spry, but she also had a lot of issues. She couldn't walk. She had back issues. She had a lot of surgeries, and we were getting aides to go up to the apartment to try to take care of them. And that wasn't working out because Sean was still having to leave work and, drive somebody to the hospital at some point. So we talked to his mom about an assisted living residence close to us on Long Island. Sean took her to see the place. It was lovely. And they were going to live together in this place that was close to us. And we were going to visit them more regularly than we saw them in Brooklyn. His dad was really not doing well. He had a lot of other things. So he had to be in a nursing home for a while, a rehab center, to get him in better health to join Dee, Sean's mom, in the assisted living residence. And so that was the plan. And then COVID happened. And Mark, this was very recent because we hadn't even cleaned, we were still paying their rent in the Brooklyn apartment, so it was still a functioning apartment, and they were in these care facilities, and we were in quarantine. So this was in March, and I was at home. I wasn't going to work. We weren't able to see them, especially his father. We weren't able to go visit. So we were trying to get regular updates. End of March, we get a phone call on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, and someone says he's not doing very well. He's not feeling well. We were like, well, what's wrong with him? And he had a fever. Okay. And we knew that COVID started with a fever, or at least one of the tell signs of COVID was a fever. Well, 3 hours later, we get a phone call back saying he's dead. He had died. And we had no lead up time. We didn't know about this March 25th order that Cuomo had in place, which was to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes. He had an order that was in effect for 46 days. To do that, you were not able to test patients coming back to the nursing home. So you weren't able to test them for COVID. And we didn't learn his dad had died until the death certificate of COVID. Sean has to tell his mom that his dad had died. Obviously the worst thing he's ever done. She gets sick a week or so later. She's transported to the hospital. We were afraid to get her to the hospital because we thought if she didn't have COVID then, she was going to get COVID in the hospital, but she just wasn't doing well. They get her to the hospital. They diagnose her with COVID, and she died a few days after that. And then I started seeing the reports about how Cuomo was the only governor that wasn't counting those who got COVID in their elder care facilities, but died in the hospital, like my mother-in-law. And I was seeing him on television, and no one was asking him the nursing home questions. So I had found out about the March 25th order after they had died. And I started doing my own research into this. And he would go on.
Janice, just to be clear, this was a government policy that was moving people with COVID into places like where your in-laws were staying.
Correct.
And causing other people there to be infected by COVID.
Yes.
So it was a policy that was leading to an increase in infections among elderly people.
Right. But to this day, he will tell you that that is not the reason of all of the deaths in New York, that policy was not the reason. So because I was seeing the governor on television not being asked these questions about the nursing homes, meanwhile, there are thousands of deaths in the nursing homes. I was getting really upset. Sean did not want me to talk about his family on television. He didn't, but he saw me getting really frustrated with the fact that this guy was kind of being hailed as the pandemic politician, like the go-to guy. They were talking about, he was holding these, across the world, they were seeing his PowerPoint presentations every day in this calm manner and talking about how many people died. And even though New York was like the epicenter of deaths here, he was still like, people were like, oh, I like this guy, even though there were thousands of deaths in New York and there wasn't the coverage of the nursing homes. And I just started getting frustrated to the point of, I saw him on CNN with his brother, Chris Cuomo. They had like a regular thing that they were doing these interviews on Chris's show on CNN. And the thing that got me really mad was they were joking about Cuomo getting a COVID test. Meanwhile, they weren't able to give COVID tests to people who were coming from the hospitals to the nursing homes. So they were joking about the COVID test with this giant cotton swab. And Mark, my grief turned to anger. I was so angry. So I decided I wanted to say something, and I wrote an op-ed, and I went on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox, and I told him my story, our story. And that's how the advocacy started. And that was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what have there's so many things we could get into, but we don't have the time, but what have you learned from that whole experience? Because now you've stepped into this whole arena, and you've become, I've seen people talking about, you running for governor, and I've seen, like there's just all of a sudden this is stepping into politics basically, right?
It is. And I'm not comfortable with that. But I wasn't seeing people like myself talking about their story. And I kept hammering away. I would go on shows, I would go on radio programs. I've written, I can't even tell you how many op-eds I've written for not only Fox, but USA Today and Newsweek and many other publications. And then it was in December, and I actually had a lead with a Justice Department official because they were doing an investigation into the nursing homes. And he did an interview with me, and I asked him, I said, has the Cuomo administration given you any information that you have asked them for this investigation into the nursing homes? And he told me, he said, as of October, they've given us nothing. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a story. Like, he's not even complying with the Justice Department to give them information. So I wrote that op-ed, and I told my husband in December, I'm like, I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up because I've been going at this like up until this point, and I don't think that this governor, I think he's going to get away with it. I just think he's too powerful. And not a few weeks after that, the Attorney General in New York, Letitia James, conducted her own investigation into the nursing homes and came up with what I had been trying to shout the whole time, is that the governor was covering up the numbers. The numbers that he was giving every time were false by at least 65%. He wasn't counting those that died in the hospital. So she did her own investigation, and that's when things started to crack. That was in January. And now we have 10 women that have come forward with inappropriate behavior from the governor. There is a federal investigation, there is an FBI investigation, and there is that DOJ investigation into the nursing homes, what went on here in New York. So, people have asked me, like, do you feel some satisfaction? Well, we're not ever going to get my husband's parents back, but I am grateful that at least there are investigations into his conduct. And if all of that time of shouting as loud as I could from the rooftops made those brave women come forward about the treatment, the way that they were treated by this governor, if that gave them the courage to come forward, then it's been worthwhile. I still sometimes think he's going to get away with it, Mark. I really do. But I'm hopeful that at least there are investigations, and I hope that they are on the side of justice, because we deserve that.
Absolutely. All right. You've been very generous with your time. The last thing I want to ask you about is your new book, Make Your Own Sunshine, and, about finding light in dark times, which is, I think we've seen already a big theme in your life. So what have you learned about that? And tell us about the book.
I started writing the book before the pandemic, but I wrote most of it and did a lot of the interviews during the pandemic. And it's not about me, it's about other people. Every chapter is about somebody doing something kind for another person. It's either something very small, like buying a coffee for somebody in line, and somebody else decides to do that, and then that person decides to do that. And from that moment, another person decides, because that was done for them, they want to continue that and spread sunshine from that moment on. To like bigger moments, I interviewed Tim Tebow, who is an incredible individual. Not only, obviously people know him as a Heisman Trophy winner and a fabulous football player, and he played baseball for a while, but he really, through his Tim Tebow Foundation, helping children, helping, people who are less fortunate in, different countries. He really is the real deal. Like, I feel like my life changed after I talked to him, just how he is so grounded and how he feels he is put on this earth for a bigger reason. So those are the types of stories that are in this book. And I'll tell you, writing it brought sunshine into my life when things were very dark. So during this whole year when we were quarantined and we lost our family members, just to talk to these strangers, and they tell me these amazing stories of how they've brought sunshine into other people's lives. It changed me. And so I'm grateful that the book is out in the universe for people to read, because I really truly believe that every story will put a smile on your face. There are moments where there'll be tears, because the one common thread through this book is the challenges that people go through, and realizing once they've been through that they want to be better human beings. So, and I became a better human being after talking to all these people too.
Beautiful. Janice, I have so much respect and affection for you, and I'm so grateful for your time and for all you've done. And I'm proud to say I used to work with Janice Dean 19 years ago. This has been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all you do. And thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
To be continued, right?
Yeah, sure.
Is there like a second timer?
Of course. Anytime you want. You are welcome anytime.
Thank you, my friend.
It's Janice Dean. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, she is not to be underestimated. Janice's latest book is called Make Your Own Sunshine. So once again, thank you to Janice for joining us on Digging Deep. And if you enjoyed this episode, please review it and share it with others. That's going to help us produce more great episodes of Digging Deep. And if you want to keep digging deep into topics and lessons like this, or if you want to see the show notes about this episode, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter, or read my daily blog, you can do all of that at letsdigdeep.com. That's letsdigdeep.com. Please check it out. And get ready for more great stories and powerful lessons on the next edition of Digging Deep. Thank you for listening.